Hey folks, I got a question about how do you save a GIF in Illustrator. There have been some student emails I've gotten that have been asking questions about it, and I think this is as good a time as any to walk you through the process for exporting your images in a file format other than AI. So I've got a really generic image I created here for this lesson, I guess. And what I want to do first is always make sure that you save the file before you do any exporting. So as you can see, I saved this file as sample.ai. And the next step then is going to be to go to File, Export. And you might be tempted to go to the Export for Screens or Export As. I think those are all junk, to be honest. What I suggest you do is save for Web Legacy. I don't know why Adobe stopped recommending that people use this interface, but it's got all the bells and whistles. It's going to give you every possible setting that you can use when you're exporting a file of any kind. So when you start here, you can start in a couple different views. You can start in an original, optimized, 2-up. I like 2-up, and the reason why I like 2-up is because it allows me to see my before and after settings. And so in other words, here's what the picture looks like coming in straight from Illustrator, and I'm using the keyboard to make my size smaller. If you're on a Mac, it's Command minus and Command plus. Minus makes things smaller, plus makes things bigger. If you're on a Windows computer, it's Control minus and Control plus. Do the same thing. And then, as you can see, it's telling you some useful information here. If I export this as an AI file, it's saying that the size is going to be about 5 megabytes. If I export it as a JPEG, which sometimes you're going to want to do, the file is about 33K, which is pretty good. But notice that the JPEG does not include transparency. That's what this checkerboard pattern in the background means. It means this file is going to have a transparent background, which you might want to use in certain situations. And we'll talk more about those later in the program. I don't want a JPEG. I want a GIF. So I can go over here and I can specify different formats. Here's the GIF one. Notice that the interface changes a little bit. If I want to do a PNG 8, that would be right here. And remember, PNG 8s and GIFs are basically the same kind of file format. In other words, we'll talk more about this in the web class. GIFs are an older standard, PNG 8s are a newer standard. And likewise, JPEGs and PNG 24 are very similar too. JPEGs are the classic format. PNG 24s have come along, and then they basically do the same thing. Personally, I still prefer JPEGs over PNG 24s just because you get a little bit better compression with JPEGs even now. So, but let's go back to talking about exporting a GIF. So when I'm exporting the GIF, I'm going to look at all these different settings right here. I don't need to worry about these most of the time. You have lossy, color, selective, diffusion, dither. We'll talk more about these actually in the web class because it gets really... That's the class where we start needing to really think through these settings. If you want to turn transparency on, it's this button right here. For the Illustrator class, until we get to creating logos and things like that, I suggest you just leave it turned off. Matte, this is actually a really important setting if you're using transparency. If you're going to be putting your image on anything other than a white background, you can specify what color background you're going to be using here, and you should know what that is before you do it. And that way, when you export the GIF file, it's not going to include those weird kind of white blocky transition spaces between the objects in your illustration and the background. And again, we'll talk more about this in the web class. I'm just kind of bringing it up now. Interlace, web snap, leave all those alone. One of the things to remember about AI pictures is that they are resolution independent. You can make them as big or as small and not lose any detail no matter which direction you go. However, if you are exporting a GIF or a JPEG or a PNG 8 or a PNG 24, this size section is going to be useful to you. You are going to want to scale up or scale down your image accordingly. I would make sure that you have this little chain link thing turned on. In other words, you don't have an X through it. And then don't make your pictures larger than you have to. If you're going to be posting these samples on the discussion board, I think 1280 by 1024 is fine, or vice versa, somewhere around there. You can do 800 by 600. We just need to see what it is you're doing. We don't need to see it as large as the monitor screen. That actually can create some problems for you, and we'll also talk about more about that later on in the program as well. Clip to artboard. That actually is really useful if you want to only include your elements and not have that kind of wider background behind it. There's some other ways of doing it, but there's a nice little feature that allows you to do it here. The color lookup table, this is a list of all of the specific colors that are used in this illustration. It works really good for cartoony images, but if you try to export a GIF, export a photograph as a GIF, this table is going to fill up and you might run into some problems because, especially if it's color image, just because the number of colors that are used in a full color photograph typically are like 16 million or something crazy like that. And obviously you only have 256 color options when you're working with a GIF or PNG. So there are ways of editing this. We're not going to worry about them right now. All you have to do then, if you're going to be exporting a GIF, to kind of summarize here, is make sure that you specify the GIF setting from this drop-down menu here. Leave this stuff alone. If you need transparency, you can turn it on or off here. Specify a good size for you, and then hit save. Okay, it's going to ask me where I want to save. For now, I'm just going to save it onto the desktop. And ta-da! You have exported your first GIF or PNG or whatever, however else you want to do this. These instructions also will work likewise when you get to the JPEGs. And again, we'll talk more about those later. But as always, if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I will talk to you soon.